Hey, Clayton, what's a soul? I've been thinking about it since we did a series at Christ Community called Soul Care. Also, what's the distinction between a soul and a spirit? Okay, let me give you the simple answer first. What's a soul? You are. You are a soul. A soul is a human being. It's a way of referring to a person. You might actually think of the phrase soul care as meaning something similar to self-care. We didn't like that phrase for our series because it has the connotation of kind of being self-focused or self-driven, which is not what we were going for. The kind of popular cultural notion of self-care doesn't really capture what the Bible talks about. We're meant to be centered on God and on other people. And yet there is something about saying, how do I tend to the person God made me to be and the inner part of my life. So sometimes soul is sort of a way of emphasizing kind of the inner non-physical aspects of who we are. So that's the simple answer. You, as a human being, are a soul. But let's complicate it, okay? Because if you ask the difference between a soul and a spirit, because the Bible sometimes uses one of those words, and in other places they use another of those words, and it seems like maybe they're similar, maybe they're connected, but also it sometimes seems like they're a little different. And so sometimes people will take those words and make a very sharp distinction between the two ideas. Almost like, here's one part of you, it's called a soul, it does these things. And here's another part of you, it's called a spirit, it does these things. And they're different from each other. There's almost two parts or two substances in you. I don't think that's how we should think about it, okay? Let's dig in for a little bit to the Greek and Hebrew words that refer to these things, okay? Greek and Hebrew are the languages that the Bible was originally written in. Hebrew is the language that most of the Old Testament was written in. Greek is the language that the New Testament was written in. And the words that we translate soul and spirit, they don't map perfectly onto kind of the English meanings of those words. So let's talk about this a little bit. The word soul in Hebrew is nephesh. And in Greek, it's psyche, or we might pronounce it psyche. And so sometimes this word is, especially in Hebrew, is translated to mean throat, strangely enough. Sometimes it means life. Sometimes it just refers to a living being. Sometimes that could even be not a human, but an animal, could be called a soul. Sometimes it just means a person, that person over there, that soul over there. In at least one place, it actually refers to bodies, physical dead bodies. It refers to people who were killed and strewn across a battlefield, those souls over there, right? And so sometimes it has this kind of nuance of that person over there, that living being over there. If you want to dig into this, the Bible Project actually has a video about the meaning of the word soul and also one about the meaning of the word spirit, and some podcasts where they unpack this. That's worth it if you want to dig in a little bit more. But the basic idea is the word soul refers to a person, or occasionally an animal, actually, who is alive, right? Like that they're a living being. And sometimes it has the connotation of referring to kind of the inner experiential part of that person, okay? So that's kind of what the word soul means. It's got a few different shades of meaning depending on the context. The word spirit in Hebrew and Greek, in Hebrew it's ruach, and in Greek, it's pneuma, or in English, we often say pneuma, leaving the P silent. So this word in both Greek and Hebrew refers to three things. It refers to breath, okay? The breath in your lungs is your ruach. The wind is called spirit, the same word, the ruach, and so is spirit, the kind of spirit of a person. And a way of thinking about this sounds super vague and Star Wars-y, but I don't mean it this way. It's almost kind of the life force of a person, really the animating power, the energy that makes you alive here. Sometimes when we say spirit in English, we think of it almost like this. The spirit is the ghost, and your body is like kind of a meat robot that the ghost kind of operates, right? Like this is the real you, and it's wearing a meat suit, and it's kind of doing that. But the spirit, the ghost, could go away someplace, and the meat suit goes away. Sometimes we think about the spirit that way. That's not really how the Bible talks about it. Splitting the body and the spirit is a little bit like separating the electricity from the electronics, right? Like they're deeply woven into each other, and separated, they break down. They don't really work, right? And so the idea that you would be a body without a spirit or a spirit without a body is unnatural. It's not how human beings are meant to be. It's not like you're really a spirit and you could give or take the body. Like they're meant to be together, and the Bible is consistent about that the separation of those things is death, right? And so these ideas are slightly different than what we think of. But here's the other complicating thing. They also overlap in meaning. okay, they're often used as synonyms for each other. So this is why I don't think that you should say, well, you have a soul and you also have a spirit, and they do two different things. I actually think they are referring to different aspects of the same reality. So let me give you an example of a place where they're used as synonyms. In Mary's song, the Magnificat, in Luke chapter 1, how does it start? She says, "My soul magnifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God my Savior." Now, if you're familiar with Hebrew poetry, you know that this is what we call parallelism. It's saying the same thing two times with different words. My soul magnifies the Lord, my spirit rejoices in God, right? Like soul and spirit are doing the same thing, and they're referring to the same reality. They're parallel. In another place, Jesus says, "My soul is troubled." He's looking forward to the cross, and he says, "My soul is troubled," right? And then it says this, after saying these things, Jesus was troubled in his spirit, and he's referring to the same thing, right? So is Jesus troubled in one part of him and then another part of him? No. These are referring to the same thing. His inner life, his inner person, he's troubled on the inside, right? So the biblical view of the human being is a unified creature that is both physical and non-physical, and those parts are so closely bound together that to separate them really disintegrates the person, which is why, in the end, what we need is resurrection. It's the only cure for our problem. Having the non-physical part of us go away to some heaven is not the solution. It's when those two things are united, when we have a body that is animated by a spirit, that's when we are whole. That's what we're talking about. Now, you may ask, okay, what about the parts of the Bible where there seem to be passages that speak about different parts of the human person as if they were distinct from each other, right? So a very famous one is the greatest commandment, like love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and strength. Or in Jesus's version of it, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, right? Are these different things, right? Are these different parts of you? Actually, what they are different angles on the same thing, or places where it talks about my soul and my spirit, these sorts of things, or God will keep your soul and your spirit. I don't think these are referring to kind of different material substances that are separate from each other. I think it's sort of like talking about different aspects of the same person. Like if you talk about a runner and you say, that runner's got a lot of power, that runner's got a lot of stamina, that runner's got a lot of speed, right? Their pacing is really good. Like you talk about these things, you're not actually talking about different materials that they have. They don't have like speed over here that you can kind of grab and stamina over here that you can grab. It's like, no. The same legs, the same person have both speed and stamina, and talking about those things is just two different aspects of the same exact thing that's going on, the running, right? And so, and by the way, please don't tell Courtney that I turned this into a running podcast again, because she's not here, and normally that's her job. But you get the idea, okay? It's talking about the same thing, just from two different perspectives and angles. And so sometimes when people say, well, the spirit is like this and the soul does that, I say, actually show me in the Bible where the spirit does something the soul can't do, or the soul does something the spirit doesn't do. You find that they're basically doing the same things, okay? So it's a little bit like when we talk about someone's body. Let's say you said, I gave it my all, and you said that person gave their heart and soul, their blood and guts to get the job done, right? You are not dissecting a person into heart and soul and blood and guts. You're not giving an anatomy lesson for precise definitions of what those things are. Even though you probably could nuance what you mean by heart and soul and blood and guts. You're just using those words in a rhetorical way to say, here's something about the person. They gave it their all. They gave it everything. So when the Bible speaks about, your heart and your soul and your spirit, it's just these different rhetorical ways of saying the whole person, all of you, from the inside out, that's what you're supposed to give to God. Thanks for listening. If you've got your own questions, email questions@BibleSavvy.com. Like and subscribe to catch our regular episodes every Monday on the Bible Savvy Podcast.